Good morning, Mr. Brown. Thank you very much for having these conversations.
It's my pleasure.
Based on your experience in Jamaica, what are the biggest challenges to achieving a just transition and protecting vulnerable groups? And in your view, what climate policies will be best addressing them?
All right. So when we look at the situation in my country, recognize that there are a few issues that we believe can impact the flow or the progress of just transition. Sorry. One of those issues, I believe, is the support being provided to, I would say, the agencies and entities that would be responsible for something like just transition. I explain it in this way. The dedicated entity, which is the climate change division that I think would spearhead such a move, I think it's not at the level to really put forward what just transition really is. And when you examine other factors, other entities, you do not really see or feel that the level of support or the importance of what just transition is, because just transition is something that is talked about, but you don't really feel the actions that are necessarily in place. Another thing for me is the lack of a clear direction. You speak of just transition, yes, and moving away from certain things such as fossil fuel-based economy, because when you examine the nationally determined contributions, that's a major part of what Jamaica wants to achieve. But then there are talks of exploratory moves in terms of oil exploration. So in my mind, you're saying one thing and then there's another thing happening. So those are some things that I believe are the greatest challenges to just transition. And in terms of how persons, the capacity to meet what is required under just transition, because we know that the jobs, they are going to be different type of jobs. Are our workers at the level to take on those new jobs? Do we have to get persons from overseas to come in and do those jobs when required? So that is something that has to be looked at, and that is something that the trade union movement has been advocating for. Let us reskill, let us retrain, get more persons to meet the challenges that are on, because yes, you want to remove the fossil fuels. What about the photovoltaic cells? Who are building those? Do we have the capacity to build it in Jamaica? Do we have the capacity to repair it in Jamaica? So those are some of the things that we've examined and seen as challenges to and getting just transition to move at the level or at the pace that we wanted to see it move.
You explain some challenges that you are facing here in Jamaica, but also in the sub-region regarding this question of climate change and just transitions. My questions to you will be to know, because this region is very much impacted by the question of climate change, what could be the policies, in your view, that have to be implemented to address these challenges?
Yes, and looking at these policies, importantly, you have to look at areas of social protection. I think that is primarily one of the first things you got to look at. There are a number of vulnerable groups that are impacted by climate change. Individuals who farm, farmers in the rural areas. What kind of policies are in place to ensure that they get the support necessary if something happens to them, or even prior? What is in place to assist them? And there are policies such as disaster risk management. How do you treat with dealing with the whole pre-planned situation as it relates to disasters and mitigation and adaptation? And for us in the trade union movement, importantly, how do you treat your workers? Because what we recognize is that there are now new vulnerable groups being created with the advent of what they consider green jobs. So you find that a lot of persons are now contract employees. They are no longer traditional employees. You get a job, and once the job is completed, you no longer have a job. So we'd want to see more policies. Jamaica is now reviewing its national employment policy to have in the tenets to really protect those sort of workers, to ensure that, yes, you might be working in an era that is new, but we want them to be protected. We are totally against precarious jobs, and we want to ensure that the green jobs that are coming on stream, they are real jobs that provide a livable wage for these individuals. So for me, we have to look at the employment policy, we have to look at areas of disaster risk management, we have to look at areas that deals with food security, and other areas. So those sort of policies are what we have to look at.
So we are living today in a context where these new technologies are growing and having a huge impact in the life and livelihoods of people. How can the Caribbean leverage technology and innovation to ensure decent work for workers in the green but also in the blue economies?
Well, there are a number of ways that we can look at this. One for me, one of the ways that we can look at for both groups is monitoring, meaning we need to have data sets and the technology to manage the data sets to determine if these persons' jobs are decent or not. So when we look at the tenets of decent work, the 4 pillars, I believe that we can match that in a data set and put that out there. And when you're applying for a job, you're supposed to be able to screen that. So therefore, you will know that whether the job is decent or not. So some things like that where we monitor, using data to monitor whether or not these jobs are sustainable and meet the requirements of a decent job. Also, I believe training. I believe that technology has reached so far where you don't need to be in a space where somebody comes from 300 miles across the world to 3,000 miles across the world to come and train you in a particular area. So you have a fisherman in Jamaica who is able to get the training, the latest training from somebody in Africa who understands that. So that is something that we have to build on. We have to train our people on how to do this. And I believe the training will be the greatest way how to formalize some of these sectors. Because fishing in Jamaica they are trying, but it's very informal. And would want for it to become, these years to be more formal, because when it's more formal, you are able to protect their rights as workers. You find a number of these persons probably don't think of themselves as workers. They think of themselves we use a word hustle. But we believe that we can use this sort of technology. We have the digital classrooms and all of that. We are basically in the AI age. How can we leverage those sort of technologies to ensure that they are able to learn what is required and build up the resilience necessary to sustain their businesses and their livelihoods, that not only for them, but their families as well.
Mr. Brown, final question to you will be to know, as you know, there are a lot of discussions around the new social contract. In your view, how can the ILO and its constituents may shape the design and the implementation of this new social contract, having in mind there will be a conference this year in Qatar on the Second World Social Summit for Development? And how do you see the role of the ILO and the constituent on this and the tripartite groups?
Well, the ILO has a major role to play. I cannot overstate that, and I respect the work that the ILO has been doing in building awareness, especially amongst different areas, because I would have taken note of that. But I want to jump on that again. There has to be a greater level of awareness built, not only with these sort of groups, but down at the grassroots level. Why I say that is that a number of persons possibly don't know the importance of what is happening. So we'd want for it to widen. I want the ILO to widen its awareness campaign. So not only persons at my level, but what I consider a regular person can appeal to his own political directorate to say, look, we want to be beneficiaries of this social partnership, so become involved. And also, we don't want the ILO to increase the focus on tax justice, paying your fair share. Because countries struggle in certain cases because entities don't pay their fair share of taxes. And for a partnership between government and the people to exist, funding has to be there. So we would want for it to be more, we want to see more entities pay their fair share so that countries can benefit. We would want to see the ILO incorporate the call for strengthening public services. Public services are what citizens depend on when they go about their normal business, whether it's the safety, security, whatever. And in some cases, we find that that's a bit lagging. And for a partnership to exist, that has to be fundamental. So we've seen that sort of work, and we want the ILO to put that also on the burner. And gender-specific, the youth has to be involved. We want to see that become a part, and well, I suspect it's a part already, but we want it to drill down to ensure that that other thing goes with you guys to Qatar later this year.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Brown, for this conversation.
Yes.